Hey there guys, Tom here, welcome back to my movie channel and thank you very much for joining me for this, my spoilers review for Mandalorian Episode 4. Yeah, seen Mandalorian Episode 4, what have you thought about this episode? Make sure you jump down in the comment section below and let me know your thoughts so we can carry on the discussion. Also, hit that subscribe button and ring that notifications bell because I have spoken and that is the way. So Mandalorian Episode 4, the Mandalorian is still with Baby Yoda trying to protect this cute little adorable creature. I love Baby Yoda. And he ends up on this planet in this little village that he has to protect, and that's where Gina Carano's character Cara Dune comes into the picture. Now I can see why people might look at this episode in particular and think this episode's just a filler episode. And to be honest with you, I think that criticism has some validity to it, but I'm not 100% on it. I definitely like this episode because once again, and even more so than in the past 3 episodes, we're learning more and more about the Mandalorian himself and what he's all about. And I think in this episode, more so than the others, this episode really shows this character's really got heart. I'm not sure how they keep managing to get emotion out of this character. You can tell exactly what he's feeling at any point in time, and you don't even see his face, so you can't register any emotion at all, and yet you know exactly how he's feeling. I don't know how they do it, but somehow they've done it. Also, we learn where Cara Dune's from. She was part of the rebellion at one point, and the fight scene between Gina Carano and the Mandalorian in this episode, that was awesome. And for a second there I thought, is she better than him? Because they end up, the fight ends up coming to a stalemate really. They're basically evenly matched. But for a second there, she was really kicking his ass. Look, Gina Carano isn't the greatest actress in the world, but I think you needed an actress to bring her kind of physicality to this particular role. And I'm very excited to see whether her character is going to pop up next. I'm sure she will, and I'm sure, of course, IG-11's going to be back at some point. And I actually really like the dynamic between the Mandalorian and Cara Dune herself. Once again, episode 4 building on what's come before in the first 3 episodes, building on the Mandalorian law itself. The villager, the widow asks him, have you ever taken, going back to the helmet thing, she's like, what happens if you take it off? And he says, you just can't put it back on. Is it like a John Wick situation where you kill someone in the hotel and you become excommunicado? Do you get excommunicated from the Mandalorians if you show your face to somebody else? I don't know, but I think that is the implied message there, because obviously there are different factions of Mandalorians, different types, and we learn in the Clone Wars that they all have like different sort of houses, a bit like a Game of Thrones scenario. And I think that different sort of groups of Mandalorians have different rules. And that's what's very exciting about the Mandalorian culture in Star Wars, is they're all different and they all have a different set of rules that they go by. Bryce Dallas Howard directed this episode, and I wasn't sure how her first episode was going to turn out because I haven't seen her direct anything. But of course, what was giving me hope was she is the daughter of one of the greatest directors going right now in Ron Howard, who did a phenomenal job directing Solo: A Star Wars Story. And Bryce Dallas Howard did a great job directing this episode. And again, this episode's filled with action. It's filled with Baby Yoda. Now, speaking of the action in this episode in particular, one thing I'm noticing throughout that's been consistent through episodes 1 to 4, most of the action sequences take place in dark, either at nighttime or in dimly lit rooms. And I'd really like to see a decent action scene, a decent fight scene, a shootout, anything that takes place in the daylight so that we can actually tell what's really going on. And I think in this episode in particular, that was really needed. You needed a bit better lighting, I think, in those sequences to really enjoy visually what's going on. Now we have to talk about the AT-ST that shows up. Oh my god, that's awesome. That's basically all I've got to say on the AT-ST. I thought that whole sequence trying to take this thing out, they had a plan to make it step in the water so it falls down and then they could blow it up, and then that didn't work. And that's again where this kick-ass dynamic between the Mandalorian and Cara Dune comes into effect. But overall, I really enjoyed this episode. I think, look, this episode might be a bit of a filler episode, but it did add some things, and it was a very cool episode overall. From the AT-ST, from of course Baby Yoda, and then that whole sequence where Cara Dune and the Mandalorian are training the villagers how to fight. That's a real kind of rah-rah badass sequence, and it's a sequence that really, I think, was handled very well in this episode and showing different cultures of different planets. I think what this episode did the most was show the real humanity in the Star Wars universe. And of course, we also learned that the Mandalorian was rescued and adopted by the Mandalorians in that little flashback we saw in the previous episode. So that's a cool bit of information. I'm still waiting to see the rest of that flashback that I think they're going to show at a certain point. Which Mandalorian saves him, I don't know. I have my theories, but I'll keep that for next episode. So, thank you very much for watching this episode, this review of this episode of The Mandalorian. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that subscribe button, ring that notifications bell so you never miss out on all my Mandalorian reviews. Once again, my name is Tom. Thank you very much for watching, and I have spoken.